All right, let's dive into one of the internet's all-time greatest mysteries. I'm talking about a story that started with just one phone call to a late-night radio show, and, well, it completely spiraled out of control. We're talking government conspiracies, weird paranormal stuff, and at the center of it all, a hole in the ground that people claim has no bottom. I mean, seriously, just for a second. What if you found a hole on your own property and you dropped a rock in, but you never, ever heard it land? That's the hook, right? That's the exact idea that grabbed millions of people listening to the radio in the middle of the night and kicked off the whole legend of Mel's Hole. So where did this all begin? Well, it started on a radio show that was basically famous for exploring all things strange and unexplained, the absolute perfect breeding ground for a modern myth like this. So this whole thing didn't just pop up overnight. It actually unfolded over a few years. It all kicked off back in 1997 when a guy calling himself Mel Waters called into Art Bell's famous radio show Coast to Coast AM. And, that could have been it. But it wasn't. Mel kept calling back between 2000 and 2002, and every single time he called, he'd add another crazy, unbelievable detail to the story. It went from a weird little anecdote to a massive internet legend. What's so interesting about this is that the legend didn't start with, aliens or shadow governments. Nope. It began with some pretty specific, strange claims about the hole's physical properties, and the first one was its mind-boggling depth. According to Mel, he actually tried to measure it. He said he took a bunch of fishing line, tied a weight to it, and just started lowering it down. He claimed he spooled out over 80,000 feet of line. We're talking more than 15 miles straight down. And still, nothing. It never hit the bottom. Okay, to give you some perspective on just how insane that number is, the deepest hole humanity has ever made is the Kola super deep borehole over in Russia. It took them decades and some seriously high-tech gear to get down about 40,000 feet. And here's Mel claiming his little hole in the backyard is double that depth, and he measured it with a fishing line. Yeah, right. And it wasn't just how deep it was. Mel told the host, Art Bell, that his own dogs absolutely refused to go near the hole. He said they'd plant their paws in the dirt and physically fight him, like they could just sense that something was fundamentally wrong with that spot. So a bottomless pit is weird enough, for sure. But this is the point in the story where things really escalate. It goes from being a strange geological feature to a full-blown paranormal hotspot, where the basic laws of physics just seem to stop working. The claims just started piling up, one after another. If you yelled into it, there was no echo. Radios held near the opening would supposedly pick up broadcasts from decades ago. People claimed that if you held a piece of metal near it, it would change into a different metal. Someone even said they saw a black beam of light shoot out of it. But then came the most famous, most chilling story of them all. This is the detail that burned itself into everyone's memory. Mel told a story about a neighbor whose dog had passed away. So what do? They tossed the poor dog's body into the hole. But then, a few days later, the neighbor swears he sees the exact same dog just running around in the woods, alive and totally fine. The dog wouldn't come when called, but it was there. And just like that, the hole goes from being a weird pit to like a resurrection portal. Okay, so once you've got a pet-resurrecting, time-bending, bottomless hole on your property, you've got to figure it's only a matter of time before the men in black show up. And wouldn't you know it, according to Mel, that is exactly what happened next. As Mel told it, pretty much the day after he first went on the radio, his land was completely swarmed by guys in military gear. The official line was that a plane had crashed, but Mel said there was no plane, no wreckage, nothing. He claims they blocked him from his own property, threatened him, and then made him an offer he couldn't refuse. A huge monthly payment to lease his land to the government, stay quiet, and just go away. He says he took the deal and moved to Australia. But you'd think that would be the end of it, right? Nope. Mel was not finished. Years later, he pops back up, and the story gets even crazier if you can believe it. He says he found a second hole, this time in Nevada. And, get this, he claims the locals there lowered a live sheep into it. When they pulled the sheep back up, it was dead and apparently cooked from the inside out. It also had this big tumor on it. And when they cut the tumor open, Mel says, a seal-like creature with human eyes came out. I mean, at that point, the story has just gone completely off the rails into a whole new dimension of weird. So, okay, that's the legend in all its bonkers glory. But what happens when you actually try to get to the bottom of it? Separate the wild stories from the cold, hard facts. Well, let's see how this whole thing starts to unravel. Well, when journalists and actual researchers started digging around, the story fell apart really, really fast. First off, they couldn't find a single public record of a Mel Waters owning any land in that county. Zero. Geologists confirmed that an 80,000-foot hole is physically impossible. It would just collapse under its own weight and pressure. And of course, despite all these searches, no one has ever found the hole. So what's the real story? Well, the best guess is that the whole legend was inspired by a real, but way less exciting 90-foot deep abandoned gold mine shaft that's actually in the area. And look, you don't have to take my word for it. A state geologist, Jack Powell, put it very simply. He said, geologically and physically, it's not possible for a hole to be that deep. It's not really up for debate. The science just isn't there. The incredible heat and pressure deep inside the earth would make a hole like that collapse on itself instantly. And believe me, people have tried to find this thing. Back in 2002, there was even an expedition led by a local shaman named Red Elk, who claimed his dad had actually showed him the hole way back in 1961. He took a whole group of people out there to find it, and they found nothing. The hole is just as mysterious in real life as it is in the stories, mainly because it doesn't seem to exist. Okay, so if there's no proof, no evidence, just a bunch of scientific facts saying it's impossible, why are we still talking about Mel's hole all these years later? What is it about this story that makes it stick with us? It's because Mel's hole has the perfect recipe for an unforgettable modern myth. You've got all the ingredients, a mysterious and convincing storyteller. You've got spooky paranormal claims that tap into our fear of the unknown. You've got the classic government conspiracy angle. And crucially, you have that tiny little grain of truth, the real mine shaft, to anchor it all. Then you just blast it out over late-night radio and let the early internet do the rest. At this point, Mel's Hole is so much more than just an old radio story. It's basically become a piece of modern folklore, a digital campfire story. It's actually so well known that in 2008, there was an entire art exhibition in California based on it, with over 40 artists creating work inspired by the legend. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. Maybe the important thing isn't, is Mel's Hole real, but why do so many of us want it to be real? What does our obsession with a bottomless pit in some random field say about us? Maybe it shows we're all still craving a little mystery in a world where it feels like everything's been explored and explained. Maybe, deep down, we all hope there's still something truly weird and unknowable out there, maybe even right in our own backyard.